Stepmom demanded I pay $900 rent in my own house. That was the moment I realized enough was enough. For years, I had been walking on eggshells, doing everything I could to keep the peace, but it was never enough. My stepbrother, Jason, spent his days chasing dreams of Twitch fame, while my stepsister, Haley, lived for the next expensive latte or perfect selfie. And then there was Sandra, my stepmom, who sat on the couch, judging me for every chore I did, while my dad, Daniel, just turned a blind eye. I was tired, emotionally drained, and feeling invisible in a house that was supposed to feel like home. But it wasn't. One evening, Sandra sat across from me at the kitchen island, flashing that fake, polished smile. I had just finished cleaning up after dinner, my hands still aching from scrubbing dishes. Her eyes narrowed, and with all the audacity in the world, she told me I owed her rent money. My heart sank as the weight of her words settled over me. But what Sandra didn't know, what she never could have guessed, was that the $1.4 million house she had been nesting in wasn't hers. It wasn't even my dad's. My grandparents had signed it over to me years ago, a secret safeguard they had put in place long before I even realized what it meant. As she stared at me, waiting for me to respond, I felt something shift deep within. This time, I wasn't just standing my ground. I was preparing to take back what was mine, and if Sandra thought she could make me her doormat, she was gravely mistaken. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. The truth was, I wasn't always this strong. In fact, I had spent most of my life being the quiet one, the one who always swallowed her pain and kept her feelings to herself. I didn't speak up when Sandra tore apart the house that had once been filled with love, laughter, and memories of my mom, Helen. I didn't speak up when my dad started to look the other way as Sandra took control of everything. But everything changed the day she tried to force me to pay rent. I realized that I had a right to fight for myself, for the family legacy my grandparents had left behind. My story doesn't begin with eviction notices or courtroom drama. It began years ago, when I was just 8 years old. I lost my mom to breast cancer, and that day, the world as I knew it crumbled. She had been making her famous peach pie, humming as she stirred, when suddenly she was gone. I remember my dad, Daniel, shattering before my eyes. He was never the same after that, walking through life like a man underwater, barely keeping his head above the surface. But then, my grandparents, Henry and Evelyn, stepped in. They weren't just my grandparents, they became my anchors. They moved into our house, not because they had to, but because they loved me. They helped raise me when my dad couldn't even look at me without feeling the weight of his grief. They also made a quiet decision, one that would affect everything in my future. They bought a house, a modest 4-bedroom in a lakeside neighborhood. They registered it in a way I never knew at the time, making sure it would one day be mine. For a while, everything seemed okay. My grandparents' love and protection helped me survive the loss of my mom, and we lived like a patchwork family. My grandma made me pancakes every Saturday, and my grandpa took me to piano lessons, even when the traffic was a nightmare. But that peace didn't last. Then came Sandra. Dad met her at a business conference in Ridgeport 2 years after my mom passed. He was vulnerable, lonely, desperate for something new, and there she was, perfectly polished, always with flawless lipstick and heels that clicked like she was walking a runway. Within months, she had moved across the country with her 2 kids, Jason and Haley. At first, I thought maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe a new family would fill the empty spaces in the house. But the moment Sandra walked through the door, something changed. My grandparents exchanged worried glances. I overheard them whisper late at night, Grandma's voice trembling with fear. "She's after Daniel's money," she said. Grandpa sighed, but said nothing. They were right, of course, but at that time, I didn't understand the danger they saw in Sandra. Sandra's arrival marked the beginning of a slow, insidious takeover. At first, it was small things. She complained about the wallpaper, about the outdated kitchen. Then, she started rearranging furniture, tossing out my mom's old decorations and making every decision in the house. Dad called it freshening up the place. I called it erasing my mom. And soon enough, my childhood home, once filled with love, became a place where I no longer felt welcome. By the time I turned 12, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like Sandra's. Sandra had a way of making everything sound like a favor. Riley, could you help with the dishes? Your brother Jason is busy with basketball. It wasn't long before helping became my full-time job. Every day was a checklist of chores that never seemed to end. Sandra inspected everything with the precision of a drill sergeant, finger running along baseboards, sighing if I missed a spot, and making snide remarks like, "A young woman should know how to keep a proper home." Meanwhile, Jason's room smelled like old pizza boxes and gym socks, and Haley's floor was buried under clothes and makeup bags. No one ever said anything to them. I was the one who did the laundry, even Jason's sweaty basketball jerseys. I vacuumed, scrubbed bathrooms, and cooked dinner until my hands were raw. But it was never enough. Sandra called it teaching responsibility. I called it slavery. She was teaching me how to be her maid. The double standards were maddening. Jason had a private basketball coach, even though he barely made it off the bench. When he quit basketball to chase TikTok fame, Sandra praised him for his entrepreneurial spirit, despite the fact that he had only 200 followers. Haley was pampered like a princess. New clothes every month, expensive makeup kits, even a car when she turned 16. When she crashed it twice, Dad just bought her a new one. As for me, I worked part-time at Starbucks just to make pocket money. Every shift I pulled, I came home smelling like coffee and caramel. It was a Thursday when everything came to a head. I had just finished an exhausting 8-hour shift at Starbucks, the kind of day that drained you down to the bone. My body ached, my feet were sore from standing on the hard floors all day, and the last thing I wanted to do was step foot into the chaos that had become my home. But there I was, walking through the front door, the familiar scent of vanilla syrup still lingering in my clothes. I just wanted a hot shower, a moment of peace. But as soon as I stepped into the kitchen, there she was, Sandra, sitting at the island, her posture as polished as ever. Her hair was curled just so, her nails perfectly manicured, lips painted with that shade of fake confidence. She looked like she was preparing for a meeting, not talking to her stepdaughter who had just spent the entire day slinging lattes for minimum wage. "Chloe," she began, her voice dripping with faux authority, "we need to have a serious discussion." I froze, still holding the spoon I had been using to stir the spaghetti sauce. My stomach churned. There was no way this conversation was going to end well. "About your living situation," she continued, as though I wasn't already living here longer than she ever had. "You're 22 now, working, and it isn't fair for you to live here for free while we cover the bills. It's time you start paying rent." For a moment, I thought she was joking. But Sandra doesn't joke. She schemes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "How much rent?" I asked, my voice flat. The words felt like they were coming from someone else, someone who wasn't tired of being trampled on by her for years. $900 a month, she replied smoothly, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Plus utilities, of course. And you'll still be expected to help around the house. My mouth went dry. $900 a month for a house I had been cleaning, cooking in, and maintaining for years. The house that I once felt safe in, the house where my mom's laughter used to echo, now felt like a prison. I looked at Sandra, trying to suppress the boiling anger rising inside me. "Are Jason and Haley paying rent too?" I asked, my voice steady, but my hands were shaking. She wiped a napkin across her mouth, not even bothering to pretend she had eaten. "That's different," she said with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "They're my children. Jason is still pursuing his career, and Haley is focused on her education." I wanted to laugh in her face, but the fury burning inside me kept me still. Jason's career? The kid couldn't make it off the bench at school basketball games and had a TikTok following of about 200 people. Haley's education? She skipped classes to take selfies with Starbucks cups. And yet, they were free to live here, while I, who had been working my ass off just to get by, was supposed to pay up. I set the spoon down, my hand trembling. Let me get this straight. Your kids can freeload indefinitely, but you expect me to pay rent in this house. Her smile twitched, the Botox freezing the rest of her face in place. Exactly, she said, almost too pleased with herself. But what Sandra didn't understand was that in that moment, I understood more than she could possibly imagine. And soon, she would realize how wrong she was to push me. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I let the silence stretch, the spaghetti sauce bubbling behind me. Sandra thought she had cornered me, but in truth, she was walking straight into a trap she didn't even know existed. Finally, I wiped my hands on a towel and leaned back, staring her down. If this is a family matter, then the whole family should be here, don't you think? Her eyebrows arched, suspicion creeping into her eyes. Fine, she said, clearly not expecting me to do what I was about to. I raised my voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. Jason, Haley, Dad, family meeting. A few minutes later, Jason stomped downstairs, clearly annoyed I interrupted his game. Haley floated in from the living room, phone in hand, mid-selfie. And my dad. He walked in last, rubbing the back of his neck like he'd been dealing with this all day. He had been, but he never said a word. They sat around the dining table, completely unaware of what was coming. Sandra stood at the head of the table like she was about to make an important announcement. We've all agreed, she began, voice dripping with that fake sweetness. Chloe will start paying rent, $900 a month, plus utilities. It's only fair. Jason smirked, clearly already calculating what he could buy with the extra cash coming into the household. Haley rolled her eyes, treating it like some sort of drama, while Dad stared down at his hands, avoiding my gaze completely. That's when I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms, and said it calm as can be. No, I'm not paying rent. Sandra's head snapped toward me, eyes flashing. Excuse me. I stared her down, refusing to back down. I'm not paying rent because this house isn't yours. It's mine. The silence in the room was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop, or Jason's fork slipping from his hand and clattering against his plate. Haley's jaw dropped, her phone hanging in midair like she had forgotten how to hold it. Dad, as usual, said nothing. His face was pale, his lips pressed together as if he were trying to swallow down the truth. Sandra's laugh came out as a high-pitched, brittle sound. Don't be ridiculous, Chloe. This house belongs to your father and me. You're just a tenant here, and you need to respect that. I didn't flinch. Then why don't you call Dad and ask him whose name is on the deed? Sandra froze. Her face twisted, panic creeping in as she pulled her phone from her pocket, dialing Dad's number. The silence stretched as the phone rang, and I could see the tension in Sandra's shoulders as she tried to compose herself. When Dad finally picked up, his voice came through, tired and worn. Daniel, Sandra said, sweetness dripping from her words. Chloe's confused. She thinks this house belongs to her. That's nonsense, right? The silence on the other end was thick. Finally, I heard Dad's voice, weary but clear. Actually, it's true. My parents put the house in Chloe's name before they passed. The room went absolutely still. Jason's face drained of color. Haley gasped audibly, eyes wide with disbelief. And Sandra, oh, Sandra. Her carefully constructed mask of composure shattered in that moment. She stared at the phone in her hand, trying to regain her confidence, but I saw it. The panic, the realization that she had miscalculated. What do you mean they put it in her name? She screeched, her voice rising. Why didn't you tell me this? Dad's voice was small, apologetic. I didn't think it was important at the time. Sandra's face twisted, but there was no coming back from it now. The truth had been laid bare. And for the first time, my dad had spoken up for me. But I wasn't done. Oh, not by a long shot. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Sandra, Jason, and Haley were still reeling from the revelation. But I was just getting started. The balance of power had shifted, and there was no turning back. I was done being the quiet one, the invisible maid. Now I was taking back my life. Stay tuned for part 3. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house was thick, like a storm about to break. There was an almost suffocating tension that filled every corner, making it hard to breathe. I could feel the cold glares from Sandra, the subtle muttering of Jason as he sulked in his room, and the dramatic sighs from Haley as she pouted on the couch. It was the calm before the storm, and I knew they were all trying to figure out how to fix things, how to maintain control. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time. Jason played his games louder than usual, his shouts echoing down the hallway, trying to drown out the reality that had just set in. Haley was busy snapping selfies, her sad girl act in full swing as she filmed her pout for her followers. And Sandra? She moved through the house like a storm cloud, slamming cabinets a little too hard, her silk robe swishing angrily behind her as she tried to act like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I wasn't the same person anymore. The truth was out. The house was mine, legally and undeniably. My grandparents had seen the storm coming years ago, and they had made sure that no matter what, I would have the power to protect myself. What Sandra didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already taken the next step. I reached out to Karen Mitchell, the lawyer my grandparents had used to transfer the deed all those years ago. When I explained what was happening, she didn't even hesitate. She laughed softly, a knowing, almost sympathetic laugh. "Honey," she said, "you don't need to justify anything. You own that house, and you can evict anyone not on the deed, including your dad's wife." It was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. For years, I had swallowed my anger, my hurt, and my sense of injustice. But now, I had the law on my side. I had the power. 2 days later, the eviction notices were printed and sealed. My hands trembled as I carried them into the kitchen, but my voice didn't waver when I slid one across the table to Sandra, then handed the others to Jason and Haley. "You have 30 days to vacate," I said, my words calm, but each syllable ringing with finality. Sandra's face twisted in disbelief. "You can't do this," she shrieked, her eyes wide, her voice rising in panic. "Oh, actually," I replied, my voice steady, "I can, and I already filed everything with the court." Jason jumped up, knocking over his gaming headset in his fury. "This is bull. I'm about to blow up on Twitch. You can't kick me out now." Haley clutched her phone, her fingers trembling as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. "Daddy won't let you do this. He loves us more than some stupid house." But I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened a video. The footage from the hidden security cameras I'd installed after consulting with Karen. I didn't know when Sandra had started taking things from the house, but there it was, crystal clear. On the screen, Sandra was rummaging through my mother's jewelry box, slipping one of Grandma's necklaces into her purse. The color drained from Sandra's face as she watched the video play. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. That's not what it looks like," she stammered, but there was no mistaking it. "It looks like theft," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "And if you try to contest this eviction, I'll file criminal charges. Your choice." The room went deathly silent. Jason's jaw dropped, his eyes wide with shock. Haley's phone slipped from her hand, forgotten in the moment. Sandra's hands trembled, but she quickly tried to regain composure, the last thread of her control slipping from her grasp. "That's illegal," she screamed, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. You can't just record people like that. I leaned forward, eyes locked on hers, the tension in the air palpable. Actually, Northwood State is a one-party consent state. And guess what? I live here. My house, my rules. For the first time in years, I felt the power shift in my favor. Sandra was the one scrambling now. But it wasn't just about the eviction. It was about more than that. It was about finally reclaiming what was mine. For too long, I had been the silent servant in my own home, cleaning up after everyone, doing the things that no one else cared to do, all while they lived their lives without a care in the world. But now I was in control. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse for her, Dad finally spoke. He had been quiet up until then, his face pale and weary, but now he sighed into the phone, his voice a mixture of regret and resignation. Sandra, she's right, he said, his words like a knife in the silence. The deed is in Chloe's name. We should start looking for somewhere else. Sandra's jaw dropped, her carefully constructed mask of composure finally shattered. Jason froze, his rage dissipating into shock, and Haley stood there, her phone forgotten, her hands trembling as she processed the weight of what had just been said. I wasn't the only one who had been waiting for that moment. Sandra had been the one in control for so long, but now it was over. The truth was out. But I wasn't done yet. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, feeling the weight of everything I had been through. You wanted to talk about my living situation? Fine. Let's talk about yours. From where I'm sitting, you're the ones who need to start worrying about rent. Sandra stared at me, her face pale, but I could see it in her eyes, the fear. She knew this wasn't a bluff. And I wasn't finished. Do you know what market rent is in this neighborhood? I asked, my voice steady, every word cutting through the tension like a knife. It's about $1,200 per person. So that means you, Jason, and Haley each owe me $400 a month. Oh, and utilities are separate, plus a security deposit. Jason choked on his soda, coughing so violently that it nearly made him fall out of his chair. Haley shrieked in disbelief, her face scrunching in outrage. But Sandra went deathly pale, her perfectly applied foundation doing nothing to mask the panic in her eyes. Oh, I'm dead serious, I said, pulling out my phone. And in case you're wondering, I also have recordings. Like the one where you called Dad this morning, trying to convince him to send me off to some out-of-state college so you could stay here. Real nice, Sandra. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jason's mouth hung open, milk dribbling down his chin. Haley looked like she was about to lose her mind. And Sandra? She was trembling, her face contorted with rage and disbelief. You can't do this, she shrieked, her voice breaking as she tried to regain control. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Actually, I already did. And if you don't like it, you can pack your bags and leave. Just like you wanted me to. The weight of those words hung in the air, thick with finality. Sandra, Jason, and Haley were stunned into silence. But I wasn't done yet. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about standing my ground, about finally taking control of my life. Stay tuned for part 4. The next morning, I woke up to a house still buzzing with tension, but it was different now. It wasn't the quiet, oppressive weight of silence that had hung over us for years. No, it was the kind of tension that comes right before a storm. Everyone in the house felt it, except they didn't know that the storm was no longer looming over me. The storm was now theirs. I had spoken my truth, and there was no taking it back. The battle wasn't just about the house anymore. It wasn't just about Sandra, or Jason, or Haley. It was about reclaiming everything I had lost in the last few years. My voice, my sense of self, and my place in the world. It was about showing them that I was no longer the girl who quietly did everyone else's bidding. No, now I was the woman who had the power, who had the right to stand tall. The morning passed in awkward silence, each of us navigating the same house but without truly acknowledging one another. Jason was glued to his gaming chair, of course, his headset blasting loud enough that it felt like he was in his own universe. Haley spent the morning in her room, phone in hand, probably updating her social media about the drama unfolding in her life. Sandra, of course, was pretending to be fine, moving through the house in a cloud of irritation. She slammed cabinets a little too hard and moved around with an exaggerated grace, as if her perfectly polished exterior could hide the storm churning inside her. But the real storm was coming, and it was going to change everything. Around midday, the sound of a moving truck pulled up outside the house. My heart raced at the thought of what was about to happen, but I knew it had to be done. There was no turning back now. The movers arrived first, two bulky men who didn't ask questions and simply followed orders. They carried box after box out of the house, each one a piece of Sandra's world being dismantled. She stood in the doorway, watching them, trying her best to maintain some semblance of control, but I could see it in her eyes. She was losing. Her carefully crafted life was falling apart. Jason and Haley, who had been so sure they were untouchable, now stood by, helpless as they watched their mother's empire crumble. Then, the sheriff's deputy arrived. He was calm, professional, clipboard in hand, standing on the curb as though he had done this 1,000 times before. It was official now. The law was on my side. This wasn't just about family drama anymore. This was about legal rights. Sandra's jaw tightened when she saw the deputy. Her eyes flicked toward me, and for the first time, I saw the fear in her gaze. It was subtle, but it was there. For years, I had been the one cowering, the one walking on eggshells, but now she was the one who had to worry. "This is beneath me," she announced, trying to hold onto whatever dignity she had left. She was wearing a faux Chanel suit, and for a moment, it almost felt like she thought she was above it all, above me, above the situation. She even tried to make it seem like she was orchestrating her grand exit, trying to turn it into some sort of twisted performance. But the reality was much messier. The movers kept carrying out her things, her designer bags, Jason's broken gaming chair, Haley's endless supply of Starbucks tumblers. Each item being removed was like a layer of the fake life she had built here being stripped away. Jason, looking like a kid who had just lost his favorite toy, yelled, "My career is ruined because I had to disconnect my streaming setup." His voice cracked, and I couldn't help but feel a little satisfied. Jason, who had done nothing but waste time chasing an online following that would never care about him, was now forced to face the consequences of his laziness. Haley, who thought she was above it all, sobbed into her phone, her tears only adding to her carefully curated, sad girl aesthetic. She filmed everything, no doubt hoping her followers would feel sorry for her. But what was she really crying about? That her world was falling apart, that she might actually have to take responsibility for her life? Sandra tried one last desperate stunt. She clutched my grandmother's china set like it was the last thing she had left, declaring it was hers. It was almost laughable how low she had sunk, trying to take what wasn't hers to begin with. But the sheriff's deputy didn't even flinch. He simply pointed to the security footage on my phone and said, "Ma'am, best not to make this worse." And just like that, the final pieces of Sandra's facade crumbled. By noon, they were gone. Just like that. The house, which had been filled with their chaos and entitlement for so long, was silent. It felt different now, calmer, quieter. For the first time in years, I could hear the soft creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, the whisper of peace. Dad didn't leave with them. Not immediately. Instead, he drifted between Sandra's sister's apartment and cheap motels. Every time I saw him, he looked thinner, older, quieter. He called sometimes, his voice heavy with regret, but I couldn't help him anymore. He had chosen Sandra, and now he had to face the cost of that decision. As for me, I was done. I had reclaimed what was mine. The house that had once felt suffocating, like a prison, now felt like a sanctuary again. I turned Jason's old room into my office, and Haley's pink chaos was transformed into a walk-in closet. Sandra's so-called meditation room became my yoga studio, a place where I could finally find peace in a home that had once been my battleground. And I wasn't alone. Mom's best friend, Elise Parker, moved into one of the spare rooms. She was the only one who truly understood. She taught me my mom's old recipes, helped me replace the keepsakes Sandra had thrown away, and reminded me of the warmth this house was built on. Together, we rebuilt the home I had lost, brick by brick. Some nights, I sit in the kitchen, sipping tea, and stare at the deed framed on the wall. My grandparents' names are on it, and then mine. It's a reminder, proof that they believed in me long before I ever believed in myself. Was I harsh in the way I handled everything? Maybe. But do I regret it? Not for a second. Sandra demanded rent. Instead, I collected justice. And this house, my house, is finally mine again. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Thank you for following along on this journey with me.